Our next speaker is well known in the Brisbane business scene, the Brisbane social enterprise scene. He works with them directly and does amazing stuff. Please welcome the founder of Impact Boom, best name ever, Tom Allen, to the stage.
It's a total pleasure to be here this evening alongside some amazing speakers, the supporters, and of course to you guys for coming, and so many familiar and beautiful faces here, so very much appreciate it. Look, we're here tonight for the SDGs, and we're here tonight for sustainable business. And with that, I cannot thank more than anybody else our traditional custodians, our Turrbal and Yagara people, because when we look at these lands around us and we look at how they've changed in the past 200 years alone, what better example do we have than those that sustained this land, the environment, and society for thousands of years before us. So it's really much, it's very much aligned and in tune with what we're talking about. Now, the question that I have for all of us tonight really is, what does it take to see our biggest and boldest ideas and actually convert them into change that tackles our deepest social, environmental, and cultural problems? So I'd like to imagine that, just for the sake of this evening, that ideas are like sparks. They are flickers of light, beautiful, attractive things that fly through the sky and are quickly extinguished as well. And when we want to take an idea and turn it into a glowing fire, a fire that provides warmth, that brings people together, that provides a space for community to connect, there's three key ingredients that we probably all learned in kindy, right? So what are those three key ingredients we need to start a fire? Any ideas? Beautiful. Love it. Of course, Larissa would be all over this as an environmental consultant. So we have oxygen, we have fuel, and we have heat, right? Now, we can choose to create a beautiful fire with that. And of course, when we start a fire, we need to be able to sustain it. We need to be able to ensure that it's going to be there to fulfill its goal. But we also need to be very, very aware that should we not take care of that fire, it can literally wreak havoc in our communities. Since 2008, when I finished my master's over in Barcelona, my core passion has really been around thinking around the environment, the conditions, the skills, and the knowledge that is required to take ideas or sparks and turn them into actionable change. So I'd like us just to rewind a little bit back to 2015. You might remember this, right? Malcolm Turnbull announced the innovation stimulus. Now, back in 2015, they were talking about unveiling all this money basically to support startups, the business community, and that sort of trickled on into local, state government, university initiatives. And to be honest, it was too late. They were way, way too late onto this. But it was an effort and it was appreciated. Now, this was an advert, and I'd like to see a show of hands if you remember this. Does anybody remember this? Two of us. Beautiful. So it was an effective marketing campaign. It ran through the country on billboards, on bus stops, and I saw this. And at the time, I was also working as a lecturer at QT in Griffith, and basically in design and innovation. And I saw it, and I said, you know what? That is absolute bullshit. The idea boom, great. Yep, like I'm working with hundreds of students, in a week, and literally by then, thousands of entrepreneurs, and thought, everybody can have an idea. We don't need an idea boom. Ideas are cheap. They're like those sparks. What do we actually do to support these ideas to turn them into actionable change? Now, along comes the unicorn. And when we look at the idea boom and that innovation stimulus, a lot of it was very much focused on economic outcomes. If you look at the original documentation around this and the talk around it. And it was very highly disappointing, to be honest, from my perspective back then. I mean, again, it was better than nothing, but what we've seen is this unicorn mindset sort of overtake the innovation and startup culture of Australia and the world. Now, I have nothing against unicorns and turning an idea of $0 valuation into $1 billion as quickly as possible. But what I do have a problem with are useless ideas that really do nothing but create a worse society, a worse world, for the benefit of a few, that is driven purely by financial gain. It was in that moment that I called it. We had to use this opportunity to move from this idea boom to the impact boom, to a place where we could actually take those ideas and do something good with them. Because those unicorn ideas can be great if we can harness all those resources and energy and time and experience of very talented people, but use them for something that we can actually so urgently need to tackle. Now, at the same time, it was of huge interest personally to say, well, we're actually in a bit of shit right now. When we look at the research we were doing and the interviews we were conducting, what we noticed was that Australia was very much lagging when it came to using business as a force for good. At the time, there were no state-based social enterprise networks, bar QSEC, and we have the CEO, Elise Parraps, in the room this evening. We had no state strategies talking about using business for good. There was no national strategy. We had a completely, basically a siloed approach to how we were going to do this together. And I think you can probably relate to the words that have been thrown around this evening as well of social enterprise, profit for purpose, impact-led, purpose-led. What else is there? I mean, we can jump into the corporate space and talk about CSR and ESG and shared purpose, and on it goes. But if we want to turn this mainstream, we actually need to come together on this. We need to go beyond actually, competing as different tribes, trying to create the same sort of outcomes, to coming together. And time back then was running out. Now, this is not the world exploding, but this was me thinking, what is that catalyst going to be? What is it that we need to do to get our shit together and to really create this movement and to create it quickly? Now, that's when the mind started ticking and, sort of became this ongoing goal, sort of trying to find what that thing was going to be. Now, in the meantime, very, very close after that, we founded Impact Boom. And as the founder of Impact Boom, that's really why we exist. We exist to create that change that we need to so desperately see in the world, to support people with their ideas, to grow the movement globally, to provide awareness. Now, in the last 5 odd years, we've been really fortunate to work with over 125 different impact-led enterprises. We've worked with over 4,000 entrepreneurs and raised probably more than $4 million now when it comes to social enterprise and other projects. But we've also really focused on the awareness piece because we believe that this is one way that we can help society and founders and businesses and corporates understand what sort of steps they can take. So we interview global leaders in the space, and we now have a global audience. And all of that research and findings can be found at impactboom.org. But I feel very privileged because my daily job is basically to hang out with cool people, doing cool stuff, and hitting brick walls and bouncing back and trying to survive, in making change. So I just wanted to give a few examples of some local businesses, so you have some tangible ideas of how business can be used for good. So these are all people we've worked with directly. Mantua Sewing Studio basically have a sewing house, sort of a fashion side of things, that support, employ and train women from refugee and migrant backgrounds. Another example, Law on Earth, legal platform, if you've heard them, tackling the access to justice issue through tech. They reduced legal costs by 90%. We have homewares. Now, This actually has pivoted recently. Mikey, the founder, has pivoted. But the core focus of this was in employing and training people who were experiencing homelessness. Recently, we've worked with Carapac down in Sydney. They are a plastics alternative to packaging. They create crustacean shell waste. They turn it into this film, and it literally creates a fertilizer for your plant pots or dissolves in the ocean. World's most sustainable surfboards, Sign Surf. Get onto them if you do surf. These guys are based in Sydney, but they have recognised a huge problem in the surf industry with a huge amount of waste that's created. Graphic design studios tackling recidivism in prisons by basically training people within the prisons and helping them when they get out. And amazing community hubs like Food Connect. Now, these guys are all about tackling and creating a fairer food system. And now all of these examples here are working with really great business models to create change and sustain themselves. And they're not just sitting there with a hand out waiting for government funding or philanthropy to help them out. So what I'd like you to reflect on, and what I've been reflecting on, are the common traits, the common habits, the common sort of things that keep these people, these founders going. And we've heard some examples this evening. And within your own team, whether it be here in academia or in the corporate world or anywhere else, like what are those people that you really respect constantly and consistently doing as leaders? And how might you take some of those things and apply it to your own projects? So I'll come back to that in a sec. But the quest, whilst we've been working with a bunch of people and programs and different projects, there was a light bulb moment. In the search for the catalyst and through research, I'd been speaking to Alex Hannett. And Alex Hannett at that time was leading the Arkina Foundation in New Zealand. And the Arkina Foundation is it's New Zealand's biggest sort of intermediary in the social impact space. It's done some amazing work. But back in 2017, the Arkina Foundation were the host of the Social Enterprise World Forum. And prior to that, what I saw was this enormous change and momentum that was being built around impact investing, around government policy, around support for entrepreneurs, around work that was being done with First Nations communities, and on it went. There was an immense amount of work and progress being made. And it was in that moment that I thought, this is it. This is the catalyst we've been looking for. I'll make the commitment now to bring the Social Enterprise World Forum to Brisbane. And the problem was, it was going to be a bloody big undertaking because we had to bring together the key stakeholders nationally. We had to fundraise. We had to lobby, and we had to do a whole heap of campaigns to basically influence those decision makers. And I was told, don't waste your time. We held it, in the second year in 2009. You're going to be competing globally, and on it goes. So lots of naysayers. Now, at the same time, in 2017, around about the time of the forum, my second daughter was born. And so questions were coming up because I had a bloody intense workload, but I also wanted to be the best father that I could be. And I wanted to be present for my kids. And so lots of questions really started to come up for me then around the balance and what is it that those leaders have that are also able to maintain a healthy family. And so what I'm going to present now is basically some reflections that talk about those traits, not just of the people that I have worked with, but also some of the things which I've sort of learnt from going through a pretty intense process myself. And the first thing which Danielle provided us with a beautiful introduction on tonight is purpose, right? And if you don't have something which drives you and drives and inspires your team, then, when it gets tough, it's going to be really hard to keep going. So that is absolutely fundamental. And at the same time, when you dream big and you have a big, hairy, audacious goal, I hate BHAGs, that word. It just doesn't quite work for me. But you need to be careful what you wish for, because if you put that out there and you work hard enough, you're going to attract it. But when it comes, it's going to bring a whole heap of extra work. The problem is, though, is that wishing isn't enough. When you manifest something, that's great. But unless you actually take action, it's going to go nowhere. So get prepared to roll up your sleeves and do whatever it takes. Authenticity, yeah, it's a buzzword these days, and trust. But if you don't establish your relationships on authenticity and trust, again, it's going to be really hard to build a team around you. It's going to be hard to attract supporters, sponsors, and others that wanted to join your ride. So what I've discovered is that really basically building a movement takes a lot of time, and it's a marathon. And I spoke about those naysayers a little bit earlier. The way around that was basically to find the innovators, the influencers, and those that were actually on the ground, not talking, but actually doing, and bringing them in. But bringing them in was a lot easier once that trust and authenticity, the trust essentially had already been established. So whilst a lot of people were saying, oh no, we don't have time, or no, we can't fund this, or oh yeah, come back to us in a year or two, I was just sort of busy building a core team. Now, once we had a few sort of bigger names and few people on this, suddenly we were sort of moving into that early adopter stage, and the momentum was picking up until it sort of got to the point of creating a bit of FOMO, and suddenly everyone wanted to be involved. But you've got to push through that. You've got to find the way to do that effectively. And another way to do that is by designing with and not for. And I don't just mean in a design sense, in a social innovation sense. Like, a lot of the work we do is very place-based. So it's not about us walking into communities and saying, this is how you do it best, good luck with it, and then walk away and then it sort of folds. It's really about working closely with the people and the expertise and the local knowledge. And what we found was in doing that, in designing, for example, a forum, it really helped build co-ownership around that specific project. And once the co-ownership was there, people were running with the baton by themselves. They were off. They were doing their own thing. And so it's just, it's fundamental. Word of warning though, burnout. I'm going to address it tonight because I've seen it way too often. Way too often with people that I work with, particularly in the social impact space. Dan, I'm looking at you, mate. Like, you know, it's a really intense topic because people apply themselves so hard, yet they hit brick walls. And look, personally, I'm going to say, once we got into this project, I was so close to burnout myself. I saw the separation of my marriage, which was, you know, one factor was the huge and intense workload I had of many others. But it was bloody intense. And what I found was, once you had that support group, once you had a whole heap of people who were invested in running and a support network, it was in that moment when I was at rock bottom a couple of years ago that I was able to sort of rise from that again and build the energy again. And here's many of the awesome team. This was us over in Ethiopia in 2019. It was here that eventually I pitched alongside of a couple of other legends to the global board to bring this Social Enterprise World Forum to Brisbane. And as we were walking away, we got the good news. We had won the bid to bring the World Forum to Australia in 2021. Now that sounded great at the time. Really great to have a global event and have pitched, we'll bring 2,000 global delegates and 100,000 online, and then this happened, COVID. And hold on, because those ups and downs are very real. Anyway, fast forward, we have to get very comfortable with risk, and you have to learn how to mitigate risk. You have to learn what those different scenarios are. Because eventually we've made this happen. It's coming here in September next year. It's taken a lot of negotiation. Elise has taken a lot of work, and Byron, put your hand up, Byron. Byron's on the team now as well to bring this here. We have other supporters like Ruth, who are leading a university network of impact, and all these other people globally. And we've seen, as a result of this catalyst, the formation of state-based networks nationally now. Just this week, the National Social Enterprise Strategy is kicked in. It's in activation stage. And we've seen state government strategies launched too. So what I encourage all of you to do tonight is to practice radical generosity. And by that I mean, what are the specific skills, resources, time, and strengths that you will have to dedicate to something which goes beyond the economics and actually creates change in our communities? What is it that you can do? But finally, do learn how to say no. Because we don't have time, and you need to prioritize where you put your time. And as momentum builds, you get all sorts of requests and board things and volunteers and someone who needs help who can really distract you from doing what you do best. Find the spark, decide what it is, think about the principles that you will apply, make a commitment, and make it happen. And let's do this together. Thanks very much.